At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. And what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's get into today's story. For hours, the shriek of metal under stress was Gib Arant's entire world. He'd squeezed himself chest deep into a server's crawlway. His surroundings shrunk to the glare of his headlamp on a stubbornly sealed coolant manifold. Grease and sweat pasted grit to his brow. If I ever met the procurement officer who signed off on these Cathorian gray compression seals, Gib grunted, his voice a strained rasp as he put his weight against a torque wrench. Gonna personally descale his insides with a plasma torch. Petra Volkovska's laugh crackled over his personal comm, a bright sound in his grimy confines. You say that about every part forged off-world, Gib. I think you're just a xenophobe when it comes to gaskets. I'm a pragmatist, Petra. Earth gaskets hold. They made this thing from recycled regrets and solidified disappointment. The wrench held firm. He gave it one final heave, his muscles burning. The bolt stayed locked. Fine. Plan B.
Does Plan B involve more swearing?
Plan B involves a percussive calibrator, Gibbs said, already shimmying backward from the crawlway. He emerged into the secondary engine room's humming light, grabbing a heavy, rubber-headed mallet from a tool locker. Also known as a big hammer, and yes, probably more swearing.
Just try to keep our only engine in one piece. I've lined us up on a real beauty, high-grade nickel iron, maybe a little platinum if we're lucky. Big enough to make our quota for this week.
See? This is why you're the pilot.
Gib wiped a smear of black lubricant from his cheek with the back of his hand, leaving a fresh streak.
You see a paycheck, I see a 50,000-ton rock we had to chew up and swallow without choking.
He gave the manifold a series of sharp, measured smacks with the mallet. The vibrations rattled up his arm. On the third hit, a high-pitched squeal echoed through the pipe, followed by a satisfying hiss of pressure equalizing.
Oh, got it,
he muttered, more to himself than to her.
Tell Riggs he can stop hyperventilating. Coolant flow is nominal.
Riggs's dry, clipped tone cut over the channel.
Too late. My lungs are already operating at maximum pucker.
You do realize that Pan-Colonial Mining Guideline 74 Gamma explicitly forbids percussive maintenance?
Yeah, that's why we're independent then.
Gibb shot back, already tightening the clamps.
Their rules say we have to store the seismic charges 3 decks away from the detonators. Well, we'd be fossils by the time we cracked the rock. Now, are we going to smash this one or debate municipal code all day?
A resigned sigh from Riggs was his only answer. Gib climbed up the ladder to the bridge. The mall's familiar thrum, a comforting vibration in the deck plates. The bridge was a raw workspace, foregoing the polished chrome of military recruitment videos for functionality. Holographic geological surveys and engine diagnostic streams flickered over the main view screen. Petra sat in the pilot's chair, her hands resting on the controls as if they were extensions of her own arms, a wry grin on her lips. She practically vibrated with energy, a stark contrast to Gibbs' ground-down weariness.
Oh, look at her,
Petra said, gesturing to the asteroid filling the main view screen. A perfect specimen, almost ashamed to break it apart.
Almost,
Gib agreed, settling into his engineering station. A chair wheezed under his weight.
Now let's finish this. Plasma cutters on my mark. Gus, you got a clean shear plate for us?
Down in the geology pit, Gus, a man whose face looked carved from the same rock he studied, grunted in affirmative.
Yeah, follow that garnet inclusion line. Should cleave clean in 2. Yeah, you heard the man, Petra. Nice and easy.
The Maw was a brutish ship, a Beltbreaker-class asteroid miner. It resembled a flying anvil with an engine strapped to its back. Its designers had assured it would regularly collide with things much larger than itself and had over-engineered it accordingly. Its primary tools were brute force instruments of industrial might. 2 articulated arms extended from the ship's prow, their tips glowing white-hot. Twin beams of plasma, steady and searing, lanced out and struck the asteroid. In the void, the impact was a violent, soundless scoring of molten rock. Petra eased the ship along the line Gus had indicated. her minute adjustments to the thrusters guiding the 100,000-ton machine with a deft touch.
All right, shear's complete,
Gibb announced, watching the thermal readouts.
Grapples away.
Magnetic launchers fired heavy tungsten cables that slammed into the asteroid's two halves, securing them. Powerful winches pulled the massive chunks of rock and metal toward the ship's gaping cargo maw, where eternal grinders would reduce them to manageable ore.
That's the last one for this trip,
Petra said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied stretch.
Enough to keep the lights on and the station stocked with Rig's favorite protein slurry for another month. It tastes like chalky despair,
Riggs muttered from his console.
But its vitamin profile is exemplary. Just as I was starting to enjoy myself,
Gibbs said, running a final diagnostic on the coolant system.
What's next?
Long-range sensors are picking up something,
Riggs reported, his tone shifting from bored to alert.
An unusual energy signature just appeared at the system's edge. 3 distinct sources.
Gibb leaned over to look at Riggs' screen. 3 clean, sharp signals glowed where moments before only the breaker's belt's faint background noise had registered.
Sensor ghost,
Gibb said, dismissing it with a wave.
Belt is full of rogue magnetic fields. We get them all the time.
This is real, Riggs insisted. The signatures are resolving. The ships, Gibb, and they're running silent.
Petra zoomed in the main view screen. 3 pinpricks of light grew with alarming speed. They were sleek, sharp-edged vessels like shards of volcanic glass against the starfield. A clear departure from the bulky, functional ships that populated the belt.
Well,
Petra said, her cheerful tone edged with a new, sharp curiosity.
Whatever they're selling, I doubt it's cookies.
Turn us around,
Gibb ordered, his gut tightening.
Slow and easy. Let's look like we're just making a course correction.
Too late,
Riggs said, his voice quiet.
They've changed course. They're coming for us.
The hell came before the ships fully resolved on the view screen. A stream of data flooded their comms, translating into flat, synthesized text across the main screen.
Surrender your vessel and resources. Opposition is statistically futile.
Gibbs stared at the words.
Well, points for efficiency.
Are they serious?
Petra asked, her hands hovering over the flight controls.
Who hell's like that?
Someone who expects compliance,
Gibbs said. He toggled the ship-wide comm.
Battle stations, and somebody get me a channel to hell them back. I just want to ask what their second-place prize is.
The opportunity vanished. Before Wren, the young comms tech, could even route the signal, the 3 alien ships moved. They shifted at once, vectors converging to form a perfect equilateral triangle around them all. The cage snapped shut. Then they opened fire. Beams of angry crimson energy lanced out. Gibb instinctively braced for impact, but the shots were wrong. They struck empty space where a military ship's shield generators would be. Another volley targeted the dorsal spine, where a warship might house its primary weapon systems. A third salvo went for the engine housing, but aimed for the narrowest, most heavily armored section, a place designed to withstand a direct asteroid strike. They were fighting a template.
They've misidentified us,
Gibb realized aloud.
They think we're a warship.
Great, so they're just shooting at our most reinforced parts.
Petra yelled, throwing the maul into a stomach-lurching spin. A plasma bolt seared past the cockpit, close enough to make the hull plating ping and groan.
This advantage is fleeting.
Gibb countered, his grip on the console bone tight.
They'll adjust. They're just working down a checklist.
Red lights flashed across Riggs' safety station.
Portside maneuvering thrusters are slag. The outer hull has a breach in Section 12. They're starting to find our soft spots.
I need a way out, Petra, now!
Our only way out is through the field's densest part.
She shouted back, wrestling with the controls as the big ship bucked under another near miss.
That's suicide!
Their models probably say the same thing! Do it!
A mining ship's first rule is to avoid dense asteroid fields at all cost. The risk of a catastrophic collision was too high. Petra hesitated for a beat. Then she grinned, a wild, sharp flash of teeth.
Hold on to your butts.
She slammed the main thrusters to full, pushing the oversized engines past every safety recommendation Gibb had ever written. The Maul surged forward like a startled bull, plunging directly into the thicket of tumbling rock and ice they had just been so cautiously harvesting. The three catch ships held their position for a critical second, their pattern unbroken. Pursuing a single damaged vessel into such hazardous environment was a low-percentage maneuver, an unnecessary risk against a cornered target. Gibb gambled that their logic would force them to wait. Petra needed only that second. She threaded the ship through a field of granite fist. Asteroids the size of shuttles whipped past the view screen. Proximity alerts shrieked from every console, a sound Riggs scrambled to mute.
Too close! Too close! Too close!
Riggs yelled as a potato-shaped rock grazed their dorsal side with a screech that vibrated through Gibbs's teeth.
Close is good!
Petra shot back, her eyes wide, locked on the chaos outside.
Close keeps them from getting a firing solution!
Gibb clung to his console, watching the threat board. The three catch signatures were holding back just as he had hoped. They had the patience of a machine, preferring certainty over risk. Then a rock the size of their own bridge clipped their port cargo arm. The ship shuddered and a flood of alarms joined the chorus.
We lost the port grapple! Hull breach on the cargo deck!
Gibb yelled, his mind racing through schematics, triaging the damage.
Seal it off! Reroute power from the grinders to the aft shields! Aft shields? We have deflectors! They're from micrometeoroids, not plasma bolts! It's the same principle, just smaller. Do it!
Petra weaved them around a final massive chunk of iron, and then they were through, breaking into a relatively clear patch of space on the field's other side. The ship was a wreck. One of its main tools was a twisted stump. Alarms still blared, and the hull groaned in a dozen different dialects of pain. But they were alive, and for the moment, the void around them was clear. Arbiter Xenos stood in the Nexus chamber aboard his flagship, the Certainty. The chamber was a sphere of pale, glowing light, occupied by him and the computational engine that guided the Ket ascendancy. He reviewed the engagement data, which scrolled around him in elegant columns of light. The encounter was a minor, almost trivial part of the campaign to pacify his undeveloped sector, yet an anomaly grated on his logical mind. The human vessel had escaped, a low-probability event. Confluence, Xenos vocalized, his voice crisp and formal. Analyze the target's deviation from predicted evasive maneuvers. The light in the chamber swirled, coalescing into the battle's complex three-dimensional schematic. The target vessel's flight path into the high-density asteroid field registered as a near-zero probability tactical choice for a vessel of its class. The Confluence responded, its voice a calm, synthesized chorus. The action suggests catastrophic systems failure or pilot error over a deliberate strategic decision. An accident, Xenos concluded. The explanation was logical and restored order. His second-in-command, Unit Commander Tyrus, entered the chamber. Her long, slender arms remained stiffly at her sides. Her hands, with their many digits, clasped in a formal gesture of respect, but she tilted her head in a way he identified as analytical curiosity. "Arbiter," she said, "the vessel's escape, however improbable, presents an anomaly. The data suggests their technology is crude, yet their actions were effective. This warrants closer study." Xenos dismissed her concern with a flick of a slender hand. "It is a statistical noise, Tyrus. You are assigning intent where there is only chaos. Do you recall the Denab campaign? The Iskari Collective feigned an irrational charge. The Confluence correctly identified it as a cover for a flanking maneuver. It accounts for feigned irrationality. This, however, was simple, wanton stupidity. Stupidity that resulted in their survival," Tyrus pointed out, her tone measured. "A temporary state," Xenos countered. "The vessel sustained damage. It's trapped. The Confluence has already calculated its most likely trajectory and resource limitations. We will find it and neutralize it within the next 12-hour shift." He gestured, and a grand map of the entire Breaker's Belt replaced the small skirmished engagement plot. Flawless vectors of conquest spread out from their position, blockading stations, seizing resources, and neutralizing all potential resistance. The campaign was a perfect, intricate piece of logic. System pacification probability near certainty, the Confluence stated. Time to completion in under 36 hours. Zeno straightened his uniform, a minute gesture of restored order. The universe was a chaotic place, but with the Confluence, one could model, predict, and overcome all chaos. This was the only way. This minor illogical human ship was a footnote, a rounding error in the grand inevitable calculation of Ket victory. A hiss from a sparking power conduit, and the hull's low, pained groans filled the mall's mess hall. The crew sat around the metal table, a collection of ghosts, grease-stained and bleary-eyed. "Damage report," Gibbs said, his voice flat. He took a long sip of lukewarm coffee. It tasted like battery acid. Riggs, holding a flex screen, knew the information by heart. The details had seared themselves into his brain. Port side grapple arm is irreparable. The main cargo bay is a vacuum. We've got microfractures along the entire port superstructure. Life support is stable, but the main reactor is running hot from the overload. They've cut us off from the breakers point. Our long-range comms are offline, and hope and emergency sealant hold our hull together. He looked up, his face grim. "We have one option, Gib. We surrender." A few younger crew members nodded in weary agreement. "Surrender?" Gib echoed, setting his mug down with a sharp clink. "Did you miss the part where they shot first and sent a text message later? They're exterminators with the Saurus rigs. They value annihilation over negotiation." "Fighting is suicide," Riggs shot back, his voice climbing in pitch. "They are a superior military force. They box us in within seconds. Their weapons are leagues beyond anything we have. What are we going to do, throw rocks at them?" The argument simmered and then boiled over, a mixture of fear, anger, and exhaustion erupting around the table. Petra stared at the scarred tabletop, then her voice cut through the noise. "They anticipated my every action. Before I even took it," everyone quieted. "Every time I tried to jink port, their firing solution was already there," she continued, looking at Gib. "When I went to roll, they were already compensating, like they were fighting my ghost. The pilot I should have been." Gib's posture changed. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes on Petra. "And a template. They were fighting a template of a standard pilot in a standard ship. But when I flew into the rocks," Petra's expression cleared with understanding, "that defied their playbook." A cold, sharp, and utterly insane thought crystallized in Gibbs' mind. They were fighting an algorithm, a machine, perfect, logical, predictive. A machine that had no data for a bunch of stubborn, sleep-deprived miners in a flying brick held together by patch welds and desperation. Their computer was beyond our wits, their fleet beyond our might. But maybe, just maybe, you could be so profoundly baffling stupid that its logic circuits just fried. Gibbs' gaze drifted to a schematic of the ship's ore processing system pinned to the wall. He stared at the magnetic launcher, a device for ejecting slag and small asteroids of non-viable ore from the cargo bay. A glorified trash chute. But it could accelerate a 10-ton object to a significant velocity. "Riggs," Gibbs said, his words deliberate, a slow, unnerving grin spreading across his face. "You asked what we're gonna do. You were closer than you think." He tapped the schematic. "We are going to throw rocks at them." The mall limped out from behind a large, barren moonlet, trailing what looked like plasma from a damaged engine. The plume was jettisoned wastewater, flash-heated and illuminated, a convincing illusion from a distance. They broadcast a generic, repeating distress call on an open frequency. Bait. "Are you sure about this, Gib?" Riggs' voice was tight with anxiety over the comm. "If they fall for it..." "Then we're already dead," Gib finished for him. He stood in the main cargo bay beside the massive magnetic ore launcher. The air was thin and cold. The bay remained unpressurized from the earlier hull breach. His suit kept his blood from boiling. 2 engineers, Han and Bao, were helping him manually override the launcher's safety protocols. We're betting that their computer is telling them exactly what we want it to. That we're a crippled, desperate ship making a last-ditch run for home. Petra's calm, steady voice announced. Target acquired. Lone scout, just like you said it would be. Moving to intercept on a straight, predictable vector. Just what the computer would order. They're so damn predictable, Gib muttered. He slapped a fresh power conduit into the launcher's control panel. The machine hummed, a deep thrum that vibrated through the deck. They're sending a single scavenger to finish off a dying animal. On the small monitor welded to the launcher's frame, he could see the threat board. The Cat Scout was closing fast. Petra had them all on a slow, steady course, making them an easy target. Gus, have you picked out our projectile? Gib asked. Best one in the bay. The old geologist's voice crackled back. 10 tons of solid nickel iron, dense, stable. She'll fly true. The internal crane system's huge electromagnetic claws positioned the chosen asteroid, a jagged, oblong chunk of metal, into the launch cradle. It's all about the timing, Petra said, her voice a low murmur. They think they're intercepting us. In truth, they're intercepting the rock. Launcher's at 100%, Gib announced, his hand on the firing stud. It's your show, Petra. Put the X on the spot. Lining it up, she said. On his monitor, a complex set of intersecting lines appeared. A projection showing the Ket ship's course, their own course, and the rock's calculated trajectory. They're still accelerating. The point defense systems are active, but register the ship as a derelict, posing no threat. Gib watched the numbers count down. The Cat Scout held its path, accelerating steadily and maintaining its direct approach. Why would it? Okay, Petra breathed. The confluence is telling him to cut across our bow for a killing shot at the engines. He's taking the bait. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Gibbs slammed his fist down on the firing stud. The magnetic launcher fired with a tremendous, silent discharge of energy. The 10-ton asteroid shot from the cargo bay, aimed into the empty space in the Ket ship's path. A slow, clumsy projectile. It tumbled end over end. On the Ket Scout's bridge, the pilot would have seen it. His sensors would have registered it, but the ship's tactical AI would have dismissed it. The object was just a piece of debris. Its trajectory was harmless. The real threat was the crippled human ship it was about to execute. Petra had aimed for where the vessel would be. The Cat Scout, following its ordained flight path, flew directly into the path of the 10-ton chunk of metal. The impact was soundless and absolute. The rock, moving at several kilometers per second, punched through. It tore a ragged, gaping hole straight through the Scout's slender fuselage, obliterating internal systems and causing a massive, explosive decompression. The Cat vessel convulsed, its lights flickering out as it spun away, a dead thing tumbling through the void. The bridge of the mall was still. Every crew member stared at the view screen, at the unbelievable result of their ridiculous plan. Then, Petra's shaky laugh broke the tension. Home run! The bridge erupted in cheers, whoops, and relieved laughter. They'd done it, fought back, and won. Gib leaned against the cold metal of the launcher, letting out a long, ragged breath. The plan was the stupidest he had ever conceived, and it had worked perfectly. Xenos watched the recording for the 5th time. The data was unequivocal. The human vessel had launched an unguided solid projectile into a random sector of space. His scout ship, in the process of executing a flawless intercept maneuver, had then flown directly into it. The confluence analysis scrolled in columns of light around him. Conclusion: a low probability trajectory intersection. The projectile lacked guidance, its launch vector too inefficient for a targeted strike. The event is classified as a chance collision, a tactical accident. An accident, Xenos repeated, the words feeling hollow. An accident of this magnitude seemed beyond coincidence. Tyra stood beside him, her posture uncharacteristically tense. Opita. They timed their action. Inefficient, yes, but lethally effective. Xenos turned his cold gaze upon her. The act was equivalent of an ancient throwing a spear into the sky and felling a passing flyer. It is luck, a random chance, rather than strategy. Then let us ask the confluence, Tyrus proposed, a challenge in her quiet tone. She turned to the light. Confluence. Calculate the human vessel's probability of successfully repeating such a random act in a future engagement. The Nexus chamber's light pulsed, the synthesized voice taking on a strained quality. Calculating. Variables are indeterminate. Human tactical doctrine lacks known models. The introduction of chaotic, non-strategic elements clogs predictive modeling. A reliable probability cannot be established. A reliable probability cannot be established. The sentence was anathema to everything Xenos and the Ket ascendancy stood for. The confluence was a machine of certainty. It required determinate variables. The Scouts' loss angered Xenos. The untidiness of it, the sheer illogical sloppiness, was an affront. This war was brutish and graceless. They are vermin, Xenos declared, his voice a low hiss. And vermin require extermination, not analysis. He raised his voice, issuing commands that resonated through the flagship's command systems. Deploy a hunter-killer team, 2 destroyers. Scour them from the field. Eliminate all statistical anomalies. He vowed that a cosmic coincidence would never make a fool of him. He would crush this chaotic little spark before it would become a fire. They're boxing us in. Petra's tone was tight, all traces of her earlier cheer gone. She banked them all hard around a shard of ice and rock, the ship complaining with a chorus of groans. These guys are good, better than the Scout. They're anticipating me, hurting us. On the holotank, 2 hostile signatures, jagged crimson holograms, were executing a perfect pincer movement, cutting off every escape route. They were pushing the Maw into open space, away from the asteroid field's cover. Gib knew the ore launcher trick was a one-time gambit. Their shields would be up, and their point defense systems would be looking for anything bigger than a fist. Their shields are too strong, Riggs confirmed from his station, his face pale. We lack the power to punch through with another rock. We need to blind them, Gibbs said, his mind racing, fueled by caffeine and a growing sense of fatalistic inspiration. Overwhelm their sensors. Give Petra a window to slip through. With what? Riggs demanded. A strongly worded letter? Gibb glanced at his own engineering console, at the primary reactor's diagram. A sealed, heavily reinforced system circulated coolant to keep the fusion core from melting the ship into a puddle. The coolant itself was stable, but kept under immense pressure and heated to several thousand degrees, a massive, contained ocean of thermal energy. He stared at the diagram, then spoke. The primary coolant system. Rick stared at him. What about it? We're about to vent it. The safety officer looked as if Gibb had just suggested they solve their problems by juggling plasma grenades. Gibb, that's a sealed junction. Bypassing the emergency seals requires cutting through the manifold. Welding a bypass would take an hour. We have minutes. It's insane. I know, Gibb barked back, already on his feet and heading for the door. That's why we plant a shaped charge in the manifold and blow the valve. He jabbed a finger at Han and Bao. You 2 with me. We need a mining charge, the smallest one we got. That will permanently wreck the entire coolant regulation system, Riggs wailed, following him into the corridor. Riggs, look at that tactical map. In 10 minutes, the state of our coolant system is going to be a deeply academic question. Gibb yelled over his shoulder. It's a one-shot trick that might kill us, but it'll work now. They sprinted through the ship's spine to the aft engineering section where they housed the main coolant manifold. A colossal pipe 3 meters in diameter was wrapped in layers of insulation and reinforced plating. There! Gibb pointed to the primary pressure valve.
Plant the charge in the casing. We need to blow the seal while leaving the main line intact.
Bao, a man who normally used shaped charges to crack asteroids, now placed one with surprising delicacy.
Bao set the charge, Chief. Ready for the remote detonation.
Gibbs scrambled back to the bridge, his lungs burning. The two Ket destroyers were closing in, their weapon ports glowing. They had the Maul dead to rights.
Petra, get ready.
He gasped, falling into his chair.
On my signal, you vent, full aperture. Aim it right between them.
Aiming the what now? She asked, but a thrill was in her voice. She trusted his particular brand of madness. They're in firing range, Riggs announced, his voice a grim whisper.
Now, Bao!
Gibb yelled into the calm.
Blow it!
A muffled thump echoed from deep within the ship. A new high-pitched alarm screamed from the engineering console.
The valve is blown!
Han confirmed.
Coolant pressure's dropping! The whole system's going to be slag in 90 seconds!
Venting now!
Petra shouted. She spun the Maul so its stern faced the two closing destroyers. From a newly created rupture in the ship's hull, a massive cloud of superheated glowing steam erupted into the void. A concussive blast of thermal energy had expanded at incredible speed. The Ket ships, poised for the kill, flew straight into it. The wave of heat and particulate matter instantly overwhelmed their sensors, blinding their systems with a bloom of thermal noise and ghost signals. The forward plating on the lead destroyer flash-cooked, buckling and glowing cherry red as a sudden temperature change stressed the metal beyond its limits. In the blinding confusion, Petra dove. She pushed them all down under the blinded Ket ship's belly and into the shadow of a large, dark asteroid that drifted nearby. They hid, for now. Xenos watched the live feed from the command deck of the Certainty. Beside the main view screen, a display from the confluence showed the optimal firing solution. A timer counted down. Predicted target surrender, 90 seconds. The plan was clean and logical. Then, on the main screen, a colossal, blinding cloud of gas erupted from the human mining vessel, a formless, chaotic eruption of raw energy. The engagement plot beside him glitched, the crisp, hostile holograms of his destroyers dissolving into a frantic storm of sensor ghost and thermal bloom. The predicted outcome, the timer, the certainty, it all vanished, replaced by a screen full of question marks. Xenos stared, his rigid posture faltering, his narrow jaw went slack. He turned his head to look at Tyrus, who stood at her own console, her eyes wide as she tried to parse the nonsensical data flooding her screen. His voice, when it came, was a dry, bewildered rasp, a question directed at her and the cosmos itself. What are they doing? Tyrus had no strategic analysis to offer. No logical framework could contain what she just witnessed. She could only state the facts as the ship's damaged sensors reported them. They appear to be venting the primary engine coolant, Operator. Xenos gripped the edge of his console, his long, jointed fingers digging into the cool metal. The act was catastrophic self-sabotage, crippling their own ship perhaps fatally. A wanton act of destruction aimed at themselves, and it had worked. For the first time in his decorated logical career, a cold sensation coiled in his gut. A signal without a name. A glitch in the perfect machine of his thoughts.
Okay, new problem,
Rin said from the comm station, her console work a blur of motion.
Breaker's point is unreachable. The Ket have the whole sector blanketed in a jamming field. It's sophisticated, it's adaptive. Every time I try to find a clear frequency, it closes.
Gibb paced the bridge, the temporary relief of their escape already evaporating.
They're isolating them before the slaughter. If we fail to warn the outpost, they'll be walking into an ambush.
The crew sat in stony silence. They had pulled off 2 miracles, but they were still one damaged ship against a fleet. Warning the others felt more important than their own survival. Gibb stopped pacing. An old memory surfaced, a story his grandfather, a history buff, had told him about ancient Earth warfare. Something about blasting rock music at an entrenched enemy, an act of psychological warfare, using noise to confuse. The Ket jamming was logical. They designed it to counter logical attempts at communication. "Wren," Gibbs said, a low grin returning to his face. "How much power can you route to the main broadcast antenna without melting it?" Wren blinked. A lot. We use it to send terabytes of geological survey data. Why?" "Forget survey data," Gibbs said. "I need to get into the ship's media archive, the deep storage, find everything. I'm talking 20th century heavy metal. I want 18th century classical symphonies. I'm looking for recordings of livestock auctioneers. Send me old cooking shows, political speeches, morning traffic reports, anything and everything." The bridge crew stared at him. Sir?" Wren asked, clearly thinking he had snapped. "You heard me," Gibbs said, his grin widening. "We're going to give them a battle language so confusing their computers will melt. Take all of it, chop it up, and broadcast it on every single frequency we have, all at once. Maximum power, unleash a flood of chaos." For a moment the crew froze. Then Petra laughed, a deep, rolling belly laugh. "You magnificent bastard. You want to jam their jamming." "They're looking for a signal in the noise," Gibbs said. "We're going to give them only noise. So much meaningless high-entropy data that their analytical programs choke on it." Wren stared, blinked, and then a wide, wild grin spread across her face. "I can do that." 20 minutes later, the mall turned its main antenna toward the Breakers Point station and unleashed hell. A digital tidal wave of human culture, a chaotic, nonsensical blast of information. The shriek of an electric guitar solo from a band called Void Scream overlapped with soothing instructions of a woman explaining how to properly baste a turkey. The thundering cannons of the 1812 overture punctuated a fast-talking man selling cattle in rural Oklahoma. The KET adaptive jamming, designed to identify and counter structured communication, was completely overwhelmed. It tried to find patterns to decode human battle language and failed spectacularly. The jamming field flickered and destabilized as thousands of analytical subordinates crashed. In the resulting electronic chaos, Petra, guided by Wren, found a narrow, flickering band of clear frequency that lasted for a fraction of a second. Wren punched a signal, a highly compressed data packet through the gap. The message was simple, a 4-word summary of their entire desperate strategy. "They're here. Fight stupid." On the command deck of Breakers Point, a sprawling, jury-rigged mining station built into a hollowed-out asteroid, the station commander received the garbled message. He stared at the 2 words on his screen. "Fight stupid." He read it again. The message was nonsensical, and yet, coming on the heels of rumors about the mall's unbelievable survival, it made all the sense in the world. He broadcast the message to every mining crew, gas hauler, and survey ship in the belt. A methane gas hauler, the payload, found itself cornered by a KET destroyer. Remembering the directive, the captain vented 3 of his main storage tanks, creating a vast invisible cloud of flammable methane between his ship and the enemy. Then he fired a single overloaded maneuvering thruster into it. The resulting explosion, though spectacular, only damaged the shielded destroyer. The KET vessel, caught in a fireball 100 kilometers wide, retreated to assess damage. A small survey ship, the Prospector, used its high-powered seismic charges, devices designed to map the internal structures of asteroids, to trigger a rock slide from the face of a large, unstable moonlet, creating a new, uncharted hazard right in the path of a KET patrol. On a deep space repair dock, a team of welders saw a KET corvette get too close. They rerouted the power for the entire station into their industrial focusing arrays, giant lasers used for cutting ship plating, and sliced a deep, molten scar across the corvette's engine block. The Breakers' belt erupted in chaotic acts of guerrilla warfare. The KET had come expecting a war against a centralized command. Instead, they found themselves in a bar fight with an entire population of angry, inventive, and completely unpredictable miners. On board the Certainty, Xenos watched his perfect, elegant invasion plan dissolve into 1,000 irritating skirmishes. The Confluence struggled to keep up, its predictive models failing under the weight of so many illogical actions. The conquest of the Breakers system was meant to be a symphony. It rapidly became a cacophony.
For the first time in days, the smell of actual food filled the mall's mess hall. Gus had managed to thaw out a stash of real steaks he had been saving, and the scent of searing meat was a powerful relief for their frayed nerves. The news of the chaos they'd sown buoyed their spirits.
My cousin flies a gas hauler, Belle said, chewing with gusto. I bet that methane trick was his idea. The man once tried to cook a sausage with a cutting torch. To fighting stupid, Petra said, raising a bulb of water.
To fighting stupid.
The crew echoed. They told stories of home, of families and lives that now seemed a universe away, remembering what they were fighting for. Later, Gibb found himself on the bridge staring out at the starfield. The ship was quiet, running on minimal power, tucked away in the sensor shadow of a dead comet. Petra came and stood beside him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to him. "You're doing it again," she said.
Doing what?
"Trying to carry the weight of this whole mess on your shoulders. You know, for a guy who complains about shoddy parts all the time, you're built from the same stuff." He managed a weak smile.
"Yeah. I'm making it up as I go, Petra. Every plan is just the last crazy idea I had before we died."
"I know," she said, her gaze fixed on the stars. "That's why we're still alive." She leaned her shoulder against his. "I'm scared, Gib."
"Yeah. Me too."
"I feel alive," she admitted, a whisper in the dark. "I used to think flying this ship was the best thing in the world, but this is different. It means something."
Gibb looked past his own reflection in the viewport at the faces of his crew visible in the console's ambient light. His crew, his family. He'd started this fight just to survive. Now, he would finish it to get them all home. He made a promise to the quiet, sleeping ship. He would see them through this. Tyrus had spent the last 12-hour shift collating every scrap of data on the human attacks, both from the mall and from the scattered resistance across the belt. She bypassed the Confluence's high-level strategic summaries and looked at the raw data, the uninterrupted sensor logs, the unedited recordings. She found the pattern of a craftsman. She requested an audience with Xenos, who received her in the Nexus chamber, his annoyance a palpable force in the sterile room. "Arbiter," she began calling up her findings. "I have analyzed the human tactics. Their actions are deliberate. They are using their deep intrinsic knowledge of their own industrial technology in ways we find inconceivable because we view tools and weapons as separate things." She highlighted a recording of the welders attacking the Corvette. Their energy weapons are crude and short-range, but they know their exact thermal yield, the correct frequency to maximize ablative damage on our hull alloy. They are experts in the application of the tools they have. She switched to a schematic of a Ket destroyer overlaid with the trajectory of the mall's coolant blast. "We base our vessel design on millennia of fighting opponents who engage in logical, long-range energy combat. Our shields are paramount. Our physical hulls, particularly our command sections, are lightly armored in comparison. A logical oversight, because every enemy has engaged the outer energy screen before attempting a physical attack." "Your point, Tyrus?" Xenos asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "My point, Arbiter, is that their strategy is tool-based improvisation. The Confluence's predictions fail because it thinks in terms of warfare, overlooking industrial sabotage. To counter them, we must abandon rigid prediction. We must become fluid. We could use our own tractor beams as kinetic weapons, or modify our shield frequencies to create ablative pulses. We must think like they do." Xenos stared at her, his expression a mask of disbelief. "Abandon the Confluence? You are suggesting we abandon reason itself and embrace the madness of these undeveloped species? That is a tactical heresy." His entire posture radiated offense. The suggestion struck at the core of his identity, of his species' dominance.
Logic was their sword, their shield, their soul. To set it aside was to become like the brutes they were conquering. You have spent too much time analyzing chaos, and it has infected your reasoning, Tyrus, he declared, his voice cold and final. I am relieving you of your duties on the command deck. I am assigning you to oversee the fleet-wide sensor array maintenance. A demotion. A public humiliation. He was sending his second-in-command to the fleet's bowels to perform a technician's job. I will resist their insanity, Xenos vowed, turning his back on her to face the glowing light of his god. I will trust in logic. I will double down. The confluence will find the pattern. It always does. The bait was too good to be true. Gib knew it the moment Wren decrypted the Ket comm chatter. A lightly defended transport convoy carrying vital replacement parts for their damaged destroyers. A perfect target for a desperate guerrilla ship. It's a trap, Rick said at once, crossing his arms. They're trying to lure us out. Or they're arrogant, Petra countered, leaning over the tactical table. They think we're just scavengers. They might undervalue our threat for a direct assault on a supply line. We're low on spare parts ourselves, Gib mused, rubbing his tired eyes. Our CO2 scrubbers are running on patched-up filters. We gotta take a risk. Their options were dwindling. We'll do a cautious recon, he decided, overriding Rick's protest. One quick pass. Anything unusual, we run. They approached the convoy's supposed coordinates under full sensor stealth, hugging the dark side of a chain of iron-rich asteroids that would help mask their energy signature. The supposed convoy came into view on their long-range scanners. 3 bulky Ket freighters, just as the intercept had described. Everything was too easy. Something's wrong. Petra set her fingers a blur over the console. The space around them, it's unnaturally clean. The background radiation is flat. Before Gib could process her words, the Ket sprung their trap. The empty space around the freighter shimmered and resolved. A half-dozen Ket warships decloaked, their forms materializing from the void like ghosts. At their center was a vessel larger and more menacing than the others. A ship Gib recognized from intelligence briefings as a Ket commander cruiser, the Certainty. The Ket surrounded them. The confluence, it seemed, had learned to predict desperation. A personal hell request flashed on their main screen. The hell was from the Certainty. Gib nodded to Wren. Put 'em through. The face of Arbiter Xenos filled the screen. He was a tall, imposing figure, his posture rigid in the cold light of his bridge. Gib Oran, Xenos said, his synthesized voice heavy with condescension. The confluence analyzed your dwindling supplies, your failing systems, and the psychological profile of a cornered species. It predicted you would be unable to resist this bait. The outcome was a statistical inevitability. As you can see, the confluence is always correct. He gestured with his slendered hand at the fleet surrounding them. Your campaign of chaos is over. Surrender your vessel unconditionally, and we may process your crew with minimal discomfort. Gib looked away from the alien commander and met Petra's eyes across the bridge. She gave a short, sharp nod. A gesture so minute it was almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Gib turned back to the screen. He took a deep breath. We surrender. Riggs sagged in his chair, the tension draining from his shoulders. Other crew members stared at the captain, their mouths agape. Xenos allowed himself a small, cold smile. Logic had prevailed. A wise, if overdue, decision. Power down your vessel. Any deviation will result in your vaporization. Understood, Gibbs said and cut the channel. He turned to his crew. You heard him. Power down everything, except... He looked at the engineering station. Reroute the main energy bus from the engines to the forward shield emitters. Keep it offline, but be ready to juice it on my mark. Rick's relief vanished, replaced by horror.
Gib, what are you doing?
Fighting stupid, Riggs, Gibb said in a low voice. Fighting stupid. A shimmering blue beam of energy shot out from the Certainty, enveloping them all. The tractor beam locked on, pulling them inexorably toward the Ket flagship. Toward their processing. The ship groaned as the Ket tractor beam pulled them in. On the main screen, the flagship loomed larger and larger, a mountain of sleek black metal.
They're pulling us inside their main shield bubble,
Petra observed, her voice steady.
bringing us right up to their forward hangar bay.
Just what I was hoping for, Gibb muttered. His work at his console was a blur, bringing up the ship's power schematics. The tractor beam was a conduit, pouring energy into their vessel's systems to keep them contained, a torrent of controllable power. Xenos is a showman, Gibb said. He wants to personally watch them take us apart.
Well, let's give him a show.
Petra grinned. Engineering, you ready? Han's voice shot back, tight with adrenaline.
Ready, Chief. We bypassed every safety cutout. When you give the word, we're going to pour the energy from their tractor beam directly into our forward particle deflectors. The emitters will probably slag themselves in seconds, but they should hold for a bit.
A bit is all we need. The proximity sensor showed them almost at point-blank range, nestled right up against the Certainty's hull.
Now!
He roared. The lights on the mall flickered as a colossal amount of energy shunted through its systems. Their forward deflectors, designed to handle micrometeoroids, flared with the power of a small star. The shields burned a blinding incandescent white, overloaded far beyond any design specification.
Fire everything!
Gibb yelled. They were inside the Ket shield bubble. Their own supercharged deflectors pressed right up against the enemy's hull. At this range, every shot would hit. The magnetic ore launcher fired a chunk of slag that hit the Certainty's hull with the force of an artillery shell. The plasma cutters, with their limited range of a few hundred meters, sliced deep molten gashes into the enemy's armor. Even the emergency maneuvering thrusters, firing their chemical propellants at point-blank distance, acted like giant blowtorches, scorching and melting everything they touched. A messy, brutal, short-distance mugging. Explosions rocked the Certainty's bridge. Consoles sparked and threw crew members from their stations. The attack was chaotic and significant. A wounding blow. In the confusion, Petra killed their overloaded engines and used the last of their momentum from the tractor beam to send the mall spinning away, as if crippled by its own power surge. The mall floated adrift, a wounded animal in the black. It vented plasma and debris from a dozen different points. The illusion of a catastrophic internal explosion came from a pre-planned charge Gibb had ordered detonated on a locker full of scrap. They cut all power, running on bare emergency life support in a single hidden sensor feed. On the bridge, the crew sat in the dark, watching, waiting. Aboard the Certainty, smoke filled the bridge. Alarms blared. Zeno stood amidst the chaos, his knuckles white where he gripped his console. They had violated the rules of surrender, using his own power against him.
Nexus analysis. The human vessel has suffered a catastrophic power overload. Threat neutralized.
The synthesized voice reported.
Recommendation. Destroy the crippled vessel from a safe distance to prevent further anomalies.
A subaltern at a smoking console looked up.
Arbiter, the human counterattack slagged our primary targeting array. Our long-range solutions are compromised.
Negative. Zeno snarled, overriding the confluence for the first time in his career. Move us in. I want to watch their hull melt. In a remote sensor station deep within the Ket fleet, Tyrus watched the events unfold. Demoted, she still had access to the raw data feeds. The Confluence tactical overlay, fed by the damaged sensors on the flagship, showed the maw as a dead husk. But Tyrus was looking at the unfiltered gravimetric data, the information the Confluence was dismissing as sensor noise. The crippled ship had a stable power core. It had a stable life support signature. It was playing possum. She saw the Certainty move, closing the distance to the human ship. She recognized the hot pursuit of vengeance over the cold calculus of war. Xenos was flying into a trap. On the Maul, the crew watched in silence as the massive Ket flagship grew in their hidden sensor feed. Its weapon ports were open and glowing, preparing to deliver the final cleansing fire. He took the bait, Petra whispered in the dark.
Get ready.
Gibbs said, his voice a low growl.
We're down to one final insane move.
Just as the Certainty settled into position, its bow pointed at the Maul's heart, Gibb gave the order.
Light it up.
Every light on the Maul flashed on at once. The main engines roared to life, pushing them forward toward the enemy, closing the final gap between the two ships. On the bridge of the Certainty, Xenos stared in disbelief. The dead ship had resurrected. It was charging them. Then he saw it. Along the ugly human ship's dorsal spine, a colossal piece of machinery was powering up. A 100-meter-long tungsten carbide composite drill, a device of crude industrial brutality. The Stinger, as the vessel schematics called it. It spun with a deafening screech of stressed metal that Xenos could almost feel through its hull, its tip glowing with plasma-focused energy. The drill, a tool for breaking rocks, filled his view screen. Time had run out. His vessel was a fixed target. His shields were useless against the physical assault. The confluence remained silent, its predictive models shattered by an event with zero probability in any sane universe. The Stinger slammed into the Certainty's bridge. Tyrus was right. The command section was the ship's most vulnerable point. The massive spinning drill tore through the light armor with shocking brutal ease. The impact gutted the flagship, its command center obliterated in a storm of shrapnel, fire, and sudden, violent decompression. The Maul's engine screamed as Petra pulled the Stinger back from the Ket flagship's ruined husk. On the bridge, the air was still. The crew stared at the wreckage, at the gaping mortal wound they had inflicted. They breathed in ragged gasp in the sudden quiet. Petra let out a long, shaky laugh.
Did that actually work?
The rest of the Ket fleet, their command structure instantly decapitated, descended into chaos. The confluence, its central processing hub, located in the now destroyed flagship, fell silent. Adrift without orders or predictions, the Ket captains fell into disarray. They ran. One by one, the sleek, deadly ships turned and warped from the system, abandoning their perfect invasion. A single Ket ship remained, a destroyer hovering at a respectful distance. It held them. Gibb nodded, and Tyrus's face appeared on the screen. She was on the bridge of her new command. Her gaze moved from Gibb to the mangled wreck of the Certainty, a long, calculating look.
Analysis,
she said, her voice clear and measured.
Your methods are effective.
She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Her ship turned, and a moment later, it too vanished into hyperspace. The battered, scarred, and triumphant Maul limped back to the breaker's point. As they approached, a small fleet of mining ships and freighters came out to meet them. The comms channels, once jammed with Ket transmissions, now flooded with the chaotic noise of human cheers and congratulations. Later, in the station's main bar, the ore chute, the Maul's crew found their drinks bought for them. Miners, welders, and haulers they had never met clapped them on the back, called them heroes, and insisted on buying them round after round. Gibb slipped away from the celebration. He found his way to the station's main engineering deck, a vast cavern of humming machinery and the familiar smell of hot metal and stressed circuitry. He stood before the station's primary atmospheric processor, a colossal, intricate machine, and found himself automatically diagnosing a faint, rhythmic rattle in its primary bearings. Petra found him there a few minutes later, holding 2 bottles of cold beer. She handed one to him in silence. He took a long drink, the cold liquid a welcome shock. He looked from her smiling face to the processor's complex, beautiful machinery, then back again. The war was over. The noise had faded. He could get back to fixing things, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Gilbert smiled.